It started like any other royal event, fancy suits, polished shoes, and picture-perfect smiles on the Kensington Palace lawn. A charity event, they said, something light for the press. The usual royal charm campaign with kids waving, posh speeches, and a safe, forgettable headline. But instead of a scripted photo op, the world got something else entirely. What unfolded that day wasn't just a surprise, it was a royal reset. Prince William walked up to the podium like a man on a mission, not with a sheet of paper or a teleprompter, but with a steady gaze that said everything you needed to know before he even opened his mouth. Beside him stood Catherine, calm and unshakable. George looked on, serious, and in front of the crowd, tucked just behind her father, stood young Princess Charlotte, composed, regal, and oddly comfortable in a spotlight that wasn't meant for her just yet. Then came the words, not dramatic or theatrical, just firm. William said, "Today, we begin something new. No mention of King Charles, no formal blessing from the throne, just a clear public declaration. Charlotte would begin her royal duties." The moment he said it, the crowd didn't just murmur, they gasped. The air shifted, phones flew into hands, cameras clicked like machine guns. It wasn't about the announcement, it was about what it meant. This wasn't a baby step, this was a leap. A young princess, barely into her teens, stepping into the royal spotlight before her time. She wasn't being hidden behind palace walls or shielded from responsibility. She was being introduced as a key figure in the monarchy's future, and she didn't flinch. She smiled. That smile alone trended across the internet before the press conference had even ended. And where were Charles and Camilla? Absent. Not just physically, but symbolically. There was no statement from the king, no reaction from the queen consort, just silence. And in that silence, the message hit like thunder. The future had arrived, and it wasn't waiting for permission. The shift had been happening slowly, behind velvet curtains and closed doors. But that day, it became real. It became visible. It became public. And no one was more rattled than Camilla. Behind the scenes, palace aides whispered about growing tension. For months, the undercurrent had been there. Whispers of changes, private meetings between William and Commonwealth leaders, Catherine stepping into quiet but powerful advisory roles, and Charlotte being trained behind the scenes far earlier than George ever had. All the pieces had been quietly moving into place. But this wasn't just about preparing the next generation. This was about redefining the monarchy, shaking off dusty protocols, replacing stiff rituals with something people could actually connect with, and that terrified the old guard. Camilla had spent decades fighting for legitimacy, surviving scandal, enduring hatred, standing in Diana's shadow, and finally becoming queen. And now, in a single moment, she was being edged out of the spotlight by a girl not yet in high school. Not because of scandal, not because of gossip, but because of something far more threatening: public love. The crowd didn't cheer for Charles. They didn't chant for Camilla. All eyes were on William, Catherine, George, and Charlotte, especially Charlotte. That tiny princess in her powder blue coat had just become the most talked about figure in Britain. It wasn't official, it wasn't sanctioned by the crown, but it was real. The people saw it. The cameras captured it. And once the world saw that image, Charlotte stepping forward beside her father, with her mother's calm and her grandmother Diana's spark, there was no going back. Camilla didn't take the news well. In fact, according to palace insiders, the queen consort practically erupted the moment she saw the footage. The name Charlotte coming out of William's mouth on live television was the final crack in a structure she'd spent years trying to stabilize. To her, it wasn't just an announcement, it was an ambush. She saw it as a direct blow to her relevance, a calculated move to edge her and King Charles out of the center of royal authority. What gives her the right? She allegedly snapped behind closed doors. She's a child. But that child had just stolen the global spotlight. And no amount of shouting behind palace walls could undo the power of that image. Camilla demanded a meeting. Not a polite sit-down over tea, but an emergency summit with the palace's top advisors. Her goal was clear: reclaim control, restore hierarchy, and reassert the established chain of command. But Charles wasn't biting. The king, once eager to shape a modern monarchy in his image, was now quiet, distracted, and visibly withdrawn. His public calendar had thinned in recent weeks. Official events were being canceled. Aides blamed it on fatigue, but behind the scenes, something deeper was unraveling. Charles wasn't ill, he was tired. Tired of fighting for a crown that didn't seem to want him. Tired of competing with his own son for relevance. And perhaps most painfully, tired of watching his wife wage a war that no one else wanted to fight. When Camilla pressed him to issue a public statement affirming his authority, he waved it off. "Let it play out," he muttered, offering no plan, no guidance, just the worn resignation of a man slowly losing control of the institution he'd waited a lifetime to lead. Left without his support, Camilla turned to the only royal with the backbone to challenge the rising tide, Princess Anne. Loyal, blunt, and fiercely traditional, Anne had always carried herself with the quiet authority of someone who didn't need a crown to be respected. She wasn't flashy, she wasn't interested in optics, but she valued order. And what she saw on that Kensington stage rattled her. Anne believed in the chain of command. She admired Catherine's work ethic, but frowned upon William's public play for control. Charlotte, she felt, was too young. "There's an order to things," she reportedly said, frustrated that the spotlight had been turned into a stage for strategy. Camilla and Anne, never close, suddenly found common ground. Not in friendship, but in shared concern. Together, they tried to rally senior courtiers, hoping to preserve what they saw as the monarchy's backbone, tradition. But their influence was fading fast. The palace staff, once loyal to Charles, began shifting their energy toward William's circle. Young aides whispered about Charlotte's poise. Overseas ambassadors started contacting Kensington instead of Clarence House. Even seasoned media veterans stopped calling Charles the modern face of the monarchy. That title had moved on. Camilla's frustration boiled into fury. Some insiders described her storming through palace corridors at night, barking orders that went ignored. Meanwhile, Anne quietly distanced herself, retreating to her country estate. She wasn't about to fight a losing battle with cameras flashing and Twitter exploding. In the public eye, the shift was complete. No official decree had been made, no titles changed, no succession altered. But the court of public opinion had spoken loud and clear. They had chosen their royal family, and it wasn't Charles and Camilla. It was William, Catherine, George, and Charlotte. A new power structure had taken root, not through politics or backroom deals, but through presence, trust, and timing. And no royal decree could turn back the clock. Catherine never raised her voice. She didn't need to. While Camilla fumed and Anne strategized, Catherine simply moved with quiet precision, playing the long game she'd been preparing for years. Her smile stayed the same, her posture calm, her words carefully measured. But those who worked closest to her knew Catherine wasn't just reacting, she was leading. The moment Princess Charlotte stepped into the public eye wasn't improvised. It had been methodically planned, polished behind the scenes by the woman who had studied the palace like a blueprint. Catherine had seen every crack in the system. She understood what made the public adore Diana. She understood the emotional void left by Queen Elizabeth's death. And most of all, she understood that timing was everything. While Camilla spent years trying to win approval through titles, Catherine won hearts without asking for anything. Every hospital visit, every school engagement, every genuine laugh with a child built something stronger than reputation. It built trust. She didn't need to wear the crown. The people already saw her as a queen. Insiders say Catherine had quietly commissioned internal polls months before the announcement. The goal? Gauge how the public would react to Charlotte stepping up. The results were overwhelmingly positive. Parents admired the grace. Young girls found a new role model. Seniors saw a reflection of tradition and dignity. Charlotte wasn't just the daughter of a future king, she was a fresh beginning. And it was Catherine who guided that narrative. She managed the chaos after the announcement with surgical calm. While Camilla slammed doors and Charles went silent, Catherine stayed poised. She let the noise swirl outside the palace walls, never showing even a flicker of pressure in public. But in private, she was relentless. Every night she and William huddled over feedback, planning their next moves not with arrogance, but clarity. Her approach wasn't just political, it was maternal. She wasn't fighting for power, she was protecting a legacy. A future where Charlotte and George wouldn't inherit a dusty relic of a monarchy, but a living, breathing institution that people actually cared about. Catherine had no intention of letting her children become symbols of the past. She was preparing them to lead the future. Charlotte, in many ways, was her masterpiece. The way she held herself, the balance between confidence and humility, the way she engaged with people, it was a result of both nature and nurture. Catherine had raised her daughter with a clear purpose, never pushing her into the spotlight, but never shielding her from responsibility either. As media outlets praised the modern monarchy, comparing Charlotte to Diana and Elizabeth, Catherine didn't gloat. She didn't need to. The reaction spoke for itself. This wasn't about one speech or one photograph. It was about rewriting the story of what a royal family looked like, and it was working. The final image said everything: William standing strong, George composed, Charlotte beaming with that quiet spark, and Catherine right behind them, steady, radiant, unstoppable. It wasn't a royal performance, it was a family leading by example. There was no formal abdication, no dramatic fall from grace. But inside the palace, even the most traditional voices admitted what had happened. The throne may still belong to Charles, but the monarchy had found new stewards, not just heirs, leaders. And as Charlotte took her first steps into duty, hand in hand with her parents, the crown felt lighter, brighter, more alive than it had in decades. Not because of gold or bloodlines, but because the people believed again. That belief was no longer inherited, it was earned, and now it belonged to them.